Honourable members, please be seated. Honourable members, we will continue with the debate, and I give the floor to the Honourable Minister, Professor Mahendra Reddy. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on this motion. Mr. Speaker, at the outset, this motion is frivolous and a waste of parliamentary time. Mr. Speaker, let me first make corrections. Factual errors made by Honourable Biman Prasad in his, when he introduced his motion. Mr. Speaker, Honourable Prasad said that before, Ministry of Agriculture had vet in every district, 12 districts. Ministry of Agriculture never had 12 veterinary vets, never had. At most, at one particular point in time, there was 3, Mr. Speaker, never had. You said it. You said that Ministry of Agriculture before. What am I wrong? Order.
Divisional.
Mr. Speaker, say, never ever Ministry of Agriculture had 12 vets. Never. I mean, veterinarians are scarce human resource, Mr. Speaker, say. For the first time ever, we now have 4 full-time vets with us on our payroll, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Honourable Prasad said that when we were giving out fencing material to livestock farmers, there was a criteria that if they don't plant junca grass, they will not receive the fencing material. Absolutely wrong, incorrect. What we said, Mr. Speaker, is that with the planting material, with the fencing material, we will also provide to them quarter-acre of planting material for junca grass. We want them to establish that. Because, Mr. Speaker said, during drought season, pasture is an issue. So we want them to establish a pasture which will survive during the drought period, high yielding, high in protein content, and once you plant junca grass, it is outside the paddock, it's a cut and carry pasture, it will last there for 40 years. Number 3, Mr. Speaker, Honourable Prasad said that we are not doing enough in terms of establishing farm roads. Mr. Speaker, over the last 3 years, we have established 102 kilometers of new farm road. Never before this level of farm roads was done, Mr. Speaker. There were 2 ways we are doing. One is the Ministry's allocation for actual outsourcing of farm road construction, that we give it out to contractor, they do the farm road. And second way, Mr. Speaker, over the last 3 years, we have acquired new machinery from development partners. So with the machinery, with the fuel budget, we get gravel from that area doing an environmental management plan, and we establish farm roads, Mr. Speaker. And that's why we were able to speed up establishment of farm roads. Mr. Speaker, this year, we're looking at about 75 kilometers of farm road establishment in this financial year. Mr. Speaker, Honourable Prasad said that we should go organic. In the same breath, Mr. Speaker, he argued that we should provide subsidy for chemicals. Mr. Speaker, this person doesn't understand about organic agriculture. While he is arguing that we must give them chemicals and fertilizer at subsidized rate, and he's saying that we should take advantage of the organic market. Mr. Speaker, we are promoting organic agriculture, and just this week I said that I was at Koro Island. We are saying that we want Koro Island to go organic, follow suit from Ratuma. Ratuma is now declared organic, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are very particular about what kind of agriculture model we have in non-sugar agriculture. We don't want to go down the path of sugar industry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have shied away from getting farmers to load subsidies and buy fertilizers and chemicals based on subsidies. Everyone knows that when you have subsidies, then optimal resource utilization won't be done because the prices are not the market price, and therefore the farmers are not getting the true signal of the input price. Mr. Speaker, ask any economist, first-year economy students, they will tell you that farmers or business person, they must face the true input and output price to make decisions about what venture to get into, because they will be doing long-term number crunching for business viability. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Prasad said that ginger farmers are getting a price of $1.60. Absolutely incorrect. Mr. Speaker, the exporters are paying $2 to $2.60 per kg. This is the range different exporters pay. In the supermarkets, Mr. Speaker, he should go today and see the label there, ginger price is sold at $2 to $4 per kilo ginger, the mature ginger. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Prasad spoke about cassava farmer. Someone approached him in Sabu and said that I've got this number of 1 ton of cassava and no one is buying. Mr. Speaker, Sabu, we got a full-time office operating to collect produce, dalo and cassava from farmers in Sabu. Cassava, you can't collect every day because you can't run freezer trucks up and down every day. Cassava, if there's a collection date, let's say Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, then they must pull it up on Monday morning. We collect it around midday, process it, put it in the freezer truck, run it down, Mr. Speaker. You can't collect cassava every day. So cassava and dalo are collected from Sub-South. Mr. Speaker, when you collect a produce, you need to dispose it off. You need to sell it off. So how do we know that how much produce we will be collecting from Sub-Sabu, Wanikoro, Langa, etc.? Only way to know it, if they sign up a contract with us, supply contract, we'll know what would be the volume, what particular date, how much they're planting. But these farmers, majority of them, Mr. Speaker, they have not signed up supply contract. What they do, today they need some cash, they'll pull up some cassava, walk up to Dalo, walk up to the Sub-Sabu office, saying, I need to sell it now. It's not a bank to cash in when you need cash, Mr. Speaker. We need to plan. IMA needs to plan. We've got markets to fulfill demand. We need to ensure that we don't take in as much as we get and run into losses. That used to happen before. That used to be the model before. No more. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Biman Prasad spoke about that, what's wrong, why are we importing beef meat? We should be, producing premium beef cuts. Mr. Speaker, ask him, tell him to go and talk to Honorable Rambuka, Mr. Rambuka. 1998, he closed the Yellow beef cattle farm. He closed the Yellow scheme, Mr. Speaker. We are now reviving Yellow scheme. Mr. Speaker, millions of dollars of Australian aid money was spent in Yellow beef farm. Yellow beef scheme, Mr. Speaker, cottages were there, street lights were there, electricity, water, you name it, Mr. Speaker. 1998, Mr. Rambuka closed that, Mr. Speaker. He should ask him and get details why he did that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're now upgrading the road up to Yellow Farm. We have established 10 paddocks with complete fencing. We're doing double fencing outside perimeter as well. Mr. Speaker, we have completed clearing 5 hectares of bush, Mr. Speaker. It has large trees, Mr. Speaker. Big trees. We need D4 to get it down to clear, Mr. Speaker, because it has been there from 98. About 60 cattle was there. What happened to the rest? No one knows. It was abandoned, Mr. Speaker. Quarters was left empty. There was a primary school would run down. Just few students are going to the primary school, just adjacent to the Yellow school, because it was full before students from the laborers and the quarters, etc., were studying in the primary school. Mr. Speaker said, this is abandoned, the entire infrastructure walked away. When I went there 3 years ago, Mr. Speaker said, I saw, a mechanical garage just lying there with, parts and all those, Mr. Speaker said. That's how they treated agriculture. Mr. Speaker said, none of the speakers on the other side talked about what is the agriculture model that we are pursuing. Mr. Speaker said, if you read our strategic plan, there are 2 critical objectives that we are pursuing. One is we want to ensure that we ensure food and nutritional security for households in Fiji. There are 2 key aspects of food security when you talk about food security: availability and affordability. Of course, in urban area, those households living in high rises, second story, third story flats working in town, you don't expect them to plant. But it should be available and affordable. So Mr. Speaker said, we don't go and regulate price of vegetables to make it affordable. We were under a lot of pressure when during COVID-19 that vegetable prices have gone up. Ministry should regulate the price. Of course we can't. We don't have a price control order to regulate price of vegetables. The only way you regulate prices is if you have a price control order. Unfortunately, Honorable Prasad the other day was talking about FCCC. He doesn't understand what are the various roles of FCCC. He never talked about mergers and acquisitions. He never talked about regulated industry. What are the regulated industry? Mr. Speaker said, no experience in that. I was the chairman. I know about it, Mr. Speaker. I know about the amount of work they're doing, Mr. Speaker. No. Back to vegetables, Mr. Speaker. Vegetable prices are not regulated. They were with a lot of pressure. We said the only sustainable way to deal with the rising price of vegetables is to boost supply. Produce, expand production, increase supply, it'll bring down prices. Exactly that's what happened, Mr. Speaker. You know very well. All of us here have done shopping and bought vegetables from roadside stores. And you saw, Mr. Speaker, all of us have seen how many new stalls have sprung up around roadsides, along streets, etc., Mr. Speaker. That's the sustainable way. And Mr. Speaker it is a responsibility of us to ensure that we don't get or face a situation of food inflation. Every country in the world, new FAO report have revealed that food inflation is rampant all around the world, but not in Fiji, Mr. Speaker. Not in Fiji. And it is our responsibility, Ministry of Agriculture, that we do the right investment to ensure that food prices are kept in check. And at least agricultural produce, Mr. Speaker said. The staple, dalu, cassava, rice, and dal. The rest would be add-ons and top-ups, Mr. Speaker said. So, Mr. Speaker said, on food security, Mr. Honorable Prasad admitted himself that, yes, during the COVID-19, when his own friend, Richard Naidu, was berating me for why are we, distributing seed packs when there's COVID? Don't you understand that when people move, virus moves? Sure. Mr. Speaker said, we took the risk to ensure that those people who are locked up during curfew hours, staying at home, had a lot of free time, would utilize the free area around their house and secure their household with regard to basic vegetable requirements, Mr. Speaker said. And that's how we were able to mobilize the entire country. Mr. Speaker said, we had long line in front of Revanga office, people coming to ask for vegetable seed. They were laughing about us giving them small seed packs. Mr. Speaker said, this is for a 1 by 3 meter garden. How much seed do you need? You don't need a kg of seeds, Mr. Speaker said. These are small seed packs for home gardening. Then we, Mr. Speaker said, at the same time, we had a different package for farmers called Farm Response Package. This package was for farmers who need seeds or planting material, suckers, cuttings, etc. Tell us 1 acre, half acre, 2 acre. We launched it in the special COVID-19 budget. There's $1 million allocated from Ministry of Agriculture for this particular activity. Food security, home gardening, and farm response package, Mr. Speaker said. And we accounted for every dollar for that money that was given to us. There were a few cents returned to the Ministry of Economy at the end of the year. Mr. Speaker said, act on food security. Mr. Speaker said, on commercial agriculture and export agriculture, our methodology, our model is to have agriculture expansion and supply based on market signal-led, demand-driven approach. Not what the other members from the other side are saying, that we should push production and supply based on subsidies. It will fail, Mr. Speaker said. That's why the rice industry previously failed, Mr. Speaker said, because when the subsidies and grant, we went up to 65% self-sufficiency in the 80s. But it was based on a wrong model. The model was that rice production was based on subsidies. When the subsidies was withdrawn in the late 80s, then the rice industry, rice production fell, started to fall, started to decline, and came to about 13%, 12%. 80s. 80s. Who was the government? So now, Mr. Speaker said, now, over the last 3 years, we have got to about 21%. 21%. My feeling is this year will be about 22, 23%, Mr. Speaker said. Mr. Speaker said, we want to get the agriculture sector in a model which is sustainable going forward. A model which is sustainable going forward, Mr. Speaker, the model is that it should be demand-driven rather than driven by grants and subsidies. Now, Mr. Speaker, having said that, none of them argued and identified what are the binding constraints in Fiji's agriculture sector. Not even Mr. Prasad. What are the binding constraints in Fiji's agriculture sector? Mr. Speaker, we have identified what are the critical binding constraints in the agriculture sector. And we are working on these binding constraints, whether it's land availability, lease renewal, mechanization, availability of planting material, technology, Mr. Speaker, these are the critical binding constraints that is bothering us, that is bothering the Fiji agriculture, which is slowing down the growth, Mr. Speaker. I have been around in the rural areas, in the interior, deep interior. I've been talking to farmers that, look, if you want to treat agriculture as a business, then one thing you must do is to save and invest. That is what is not happening in the rural and interior agriculture sector, Mr. Speaker. That's a critical binding constraint that is lacking, Mr. Speaker. Why are Matangalis and villages with large tracts of land, their growth is stagnant? Because, Mr. Speaker, they're not saving and investing, and therefore they're not creating surplus. If they don't create surplus, Mr. Speaker, how will they invest? What will they invest? What will they invest? Because they're not creating surplus, nothing to save, nothing to invest. So they'll sit down continuously and say that if something is given from external, then we will invest there. Mr. Speaker, I'm now saying that, look, we will give you the initial leverage. We will give you the planting material. We will assist you in land preparation, but grow for the market. That's what it means when you want to treat agriculture or your farm as a business. A critical attribute of a farm business is, 1, you grow for the market. 2, you create surplus. 3, part of it you save, part of it you spend in your household, part of it you invest. That's how every year when you invest, your farm, you'll grow as a business. Ask any business person. No business person, Mr. Speaker, will tell you that without savings and investment, we can grow. Of course, you top up that pool of investment money that you require by borrowing. A growing business person may not have enough of savings, and they'll go to the financial sector, and that's exactly what we have done, Mr. Speaker. For the first time ever, we said, with $500,000 from government budget, approved by Cabinet, we have established a new program called Commercial Farmers Equity Package. In this Commercial Farmers Equity Package, if someone needs $100,000 to buy an excavator or a tractor, we assess the application, we fill up the forms for FDB, take it to the FDB, convince FDB to loan to these farmers $100,000, we pay 20% of the equity contribution, $20,000. Mr. Speaker, we have given to 7 farmers this year for commercial investment. One in Lautoka, Mr. Speaker, who is developing, who have established a manufacturing plant to manufacture cassava flour and cassava starch, and is exporting, Mr. Speaker. I've started to export in a small way now, and is expanding now. So, Mr. Speaker, he is now created a new market for cassava farmers who are growing cassava in that area. Once he further expands, he will buy all cassava from Lautoka, Amba, and nearby areas, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, what we have done, Mr. Speaker, is used our strategic plan, look at the key strategies, and from that we redefine the model that we want to use for agriculture growth and development, identified the new programs, and said these are the programs which will allow us to expand agriculture. Programs like provision of planting material, land preparation, protected agriculture, Mr. Speaker. We have said that, look, we don't want hotels to come and tell us that we only are able to get produce during the season. Where is the produce during off-season? And therefore we have to import. So we are now providing them with setting up hydroponics and greenhouses, Mr. Speaker. Fencing material, Mr. Speaker. Why are we importing livestock meat into the country? Because you've got a large number of smallholder farms which are not able to go into medium or large holdings because they don't have fencing material. So, of course, we are targeting them. This time around, we gave 260 farmers with beef cattle fencing material, and we said that we will monitor your farm, and the successful one, we will construct a stockyard, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they're talking about impact. I have said, Mr. Speaker, repeatedly, that if you want to talk about impact, let's look at What is the production data? What is the production data? What is the export data, Mr. Speaker said? First time ever, we were able to surpass sugar. Every time when agriculture sector's discussion was happening, non-sugar agriculture was not in the picture because they were not bringing in much export revenue. It was only sugar. First time ever in 2020, our exports went up to 106 million, over sugar exports were 101 million. 2021, non-sugar agriculture exports went to 123 million. Mr. Speaker, sugar went down further. Anyway, so Mr. Speaker, what we are saying is that, what's your benchmark for performance? Isn't it export income? Okay, let's look at production. After feeding the entire country, the surplus was exported and the surplus started to increase. Mr. Speaker said, you look at key commodities, ginger. The production went up from 9,398 tons to 13,850. Isn't that a performance indicator? Dalo, production went up from 2019, 51,500 to 54,000 in 2021. Isn't that a production performance indicator? Ginger, production went up from 9,300 tons in 2019 to 13,800 tons. Isn't that the performance indicator? Dalo, production went up from 51,000 tons in 2019 to 54,000 tons in 2021. Yangona, production went up from 11,000 tons in 2019 to 13,000 tons in 2021. Isn't that the performance indicator? Turmeric, production went up from 1,200 tons in 2019 to 2,300 tons in 2021. Mr. Speaker said, overall production of agriculture, total value of agriculture output went up from $598 million in 2014 to $756 million in 2020, Mr. Speaker said. What else they want, Mr. This is the Bureau of Stats data I'm talking about. This is the table. What Kurindani showed yesterday, a decline in GDP, was total output in the country. He doesn't even know the difference between total GDP and agricultural GDP. He doesn't know how to read this table. Read this table, borrow it from me, spend some time with me, or spend some time with your, panel economists there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Minister for his contribution to the debate. I now give the floor to the Honourable Attorney General. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I'll be very brief. I was, in fact, a closer look at Honourable Prasad's motion. I was kind of a bit flabbergasted because he's saying that this committee should be set up to assess the impact of direct initiatives to farmers in the agriculture sector, particular distribution of seeds, seedlings for cash crops, help in the form of materials provided to dairy farmers, provision of irrigation pumps, piping, rice planting, ploughing and harrowing of land by the Ministry of Agriculture, handling of breeder goat sheep, and report back at the next sitting of Parliament. All of this to be assessed and come back at the next sitting of Parliament, which may be in 3 weeks' time. Mr. Speaker, sir, and I think that confirms that this is more of a political stunt than anything else, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, and I think Honourable Prasad needs to be, upfront about this. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to very quickly. He quoted the World Bank IFC report. He loves to quote them when it suits him. He condemns them when it doesn't suit him. He says World Bank, cooked up the figures with us in poverty, and now he's sort of quoting from that. But actually, Mr. Speaker, sir, if one reads this report, in the way that it was written, and we actually welcome these reports because these reports, Mr. Speaker, sir, does give a third-party analysis of some of the shortcomings that we may have, and we all need to know that there are shortcomings and how we can improve upon them. What can we do to address them? Of course, not all size fits all too. I mean, for example, what he did not mention in Informed Parliament, in fact, the World Bank and IFC always wants us to remove price control. They don't want price control on bread. Everybody in this Parliament wants price control on bread. Everybody in this Parliament wants price control on wheat flour. Yet, World Bank does not want it. That paragraph is there on page 11. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. So he forgot to mention that. And I'm sure Honourable Naulumatua wants price control removed. Gives her the freedom to be able to charge what price she believes the market should dictate. But they're beholden to price control because that's what has been dictated through the regulatory framework. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, sir, he talked about how our agro-logistics was so 200% higher than other ports in Asia Pacific. The population of, when they mention Asia Pacific, they're talking about countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Singapore. The throughput at those wharves is thousands of times higher than Fiji. So obviously the volume is higher, the cost will be lower. And this is one of the things that we've always been saying to the World Banks and the IMFs of the world, don't put us in Asia Pacific, put us in the Pacific category only. And only then can you compare apples with apples. In the same way, for example, they've talked about the sector analysis estimates that cargo fees in inter-island shipping are double that of Papua New Guinea, a country with a population of nearly 9 million people, and Philippines, a country with a population of about 65 million. And we are not even 900,000. So obviously our cost inter-island shipping will be higher. So, to then sort of randomly and only selectively choose these quotes from these studies is again not being, upfront with what the analysis does put forward. It says, while Fiji's air transport connectivity for passengers is excellent, there is significant room for improvement in the country's air freight services. We accept that. And in fact, there's some work currently being carried out with Fiji Airways. Members of the opposition condemned the purchase of A350. But for the first time, you have an aircraft that can carry up to 30 tons. Mr. Speaker, sir. And so it is as big as it is on top as it is at the bottom. It can carry a lot of freight. I mean, he failed to mention, one of his former candidates in the last election, the CEO of Nature's Way, Brown, was your candidate. We can tell you about some of the shenanigans that takes place there. It's completely 100% government funded. Government, in fact, set it up and let it alone to this cooperative to run. And we know what went on there, Mr. Speaker, sir. So again, Mr. Speaker, sir, I just wanted to highlight that Honorable Prasad has been very selective. There are numerous sort of positives that came out of it. In his report, it says, Fiji recorded its strongest period of gross domestic product growth since achieving independence in 1970 in the decade leading up to COVID-19. This is the book that he's quoting. That's what they're saying. Underpinned by rising productivity and investment, improved political stability, and a booming tourism sector. Again, the same report that he's quoting from. 2, the government of Fiji has taken several steps to improve its investment legal and regulatory regime. A new investment law that includes a full range of investor rights and protections in accordance with international best practices was drafted and passed in Fiji's parliament in June 2021. 3, the government of Fiji has made significant efforts to streamline the process. For example, launched an online platform for firm registration, enabled online registration for tax identifications, simplified requirements to obtain a business license, reducing processing time from 11 to 2 days, and eliminating the business licensing framework since August 2020. 4, over the last decade, access to education at all levels has significantly increased due to the introduction of subsidies and scholarships. 5, Fiji's financial system is one of the most developed in the Pacific Island countries, with the Reserve Bank of Fiji creating an enabling environment for development while maintaining financial stability. If you listen to them, you think this was not happening in Fiji. 6, Fiji has high levels of access to energy. 7, Fiji has been at the forefront of climate change agenda due to the adverse effects on its economy, people and livelihoods. Next, Fiji's potential as an outsourcing hub in the Asia-Pacific region is yet to be fully tapped and could provide Fiji's economy with climate-resilient source of growth and inclusive jobs, particularly for youth and women. When we talked about outsourcing, they said, pie-in-the-sky stuff. That's what they said. Last but not least, Fiji is a competitive value proposition as an outsourcing destination offering a relatively well-educated and accent-neutral English-speaking workforce, a friendly service culture, sound ICT infrastructure, low labor costs, and a near-shore status for large regional source markets such as Australia and New Zealand. Mr. Speaker, sir, in fact, tomorrow afternoon after lunch, we're meeting a company from UK that's looking at creating about 2,000 to 3,000 jobs in the outsourcing services sector. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, I digress. I come back to the fundamental issue. Honourable Sajid Anand actually tapped into this about the certainty that is required in the agricultural sector. I go back again to leases pertaining to agriculture leases. For in Fiji for years, you leased state land or leased Itoke land for tourism, 99 years. Residential, 99 years. Commercial, 99 years. Industrial, 99 years. Agriculture, 30 years. Agriculture, 30 years. No mainstream banks lent in the agriculture sector unless the land you had was freehold. The National Bank of Fiji, which Rambuka put down the toilet, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, it is a fact. Is he your next party leader? Mr. Speaker, sir, put down the toilet, Mr. Speaker, sir. Used to have crop liens. I worked in colonial and that crop lien culture went to colonial. I don't know whether BSP is doing that. FDB now is the only institution that lends to farmers and subsidized by government, Mr. Speaker, sir. So agriculture has not seen the level of investment that agriculture actually requires to be an active participant in the 21st century agriculture global sector. You need mechanization. Under the Bainimarama government and now the Fiji First government, the sugarcane industry is now getting cane harvesters. Cane harvesters, 1/3 paid for by government, 2/3 a loan from FDB. Mr. Speaker, sir, when you have 5-acre farms, 3-acre farms, 4-acre farms, you won't get that level of production. That volume won't be there. So obviously your cost structure will be higher. Mr. Speaker, sir, these are some of the fundamental issues that affects the agriculture sector in Fiji and has affected the agriculture sector in Fiji. And members from the other side continuously do not want to address this issue. Continuously want to undermine the land tenure system, Mr. Speaker, sir, for political advantage, political gain. Not looking at how we can increase the productive capacity of our country, and indeed, specifically in this instance, the agriculture sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point that they went on about dairy industry, I still have till today in my drawer, in my office, a receipt for Rewa Dairy Cooperative where the CEO bought a Rolex watch from Prouds, funded by Rewa Dairy. Mr. Speaker, sir. The debt stock of Rewa Dairy, Mr. Speaker, sir, was so high and the farmers were actually liable for that debt. That debt has gone. They're now Class B shareholders without having to be liable for the liabilities of the company. Mr. Speaker, sir. They only get dividends. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point that Honorable Sri Ratu also highlighted, Honorable Reddy touched upon. 1987 saw a huge brain drain of people in the agriculture sector. Vets left, scientists left. I think Honorable Sri Ratu mentioned a story where PM and the Honorable Sri Ratu had gone to Thailand, where one of the companies, one of the top scientists was actually somebody from Fiji. He worked there and they praised him. He had moved along, but they said, such a good scientist. I was recently in Wagga Wagga where I met a gentleman where his father had left Fiji in 87. He was a groundwater specialist. Left in 87, the Australians obviously used him to the maximum. Mr. Speaker, sir, there's a lot of brain drain issues that have taken place, both that affected the agriculture sector too. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point that I also wanted to make was the point pertaining to the encouragement of training through the scholarships, through the TELs. We're seeing now more and more people in the agriculture sector. There's a couple more vets have actually come into the agriculture sector to be able to get our people trained. If you look at the toppers, Mr. Speaker, sir, for a number of years, we've had a proclivity in the toppers. About 70% of the places were reserved for the science area. Foresters, marine scientists, all those people in the science areas that we needed to obviously ensure that that gives increases productivity. Last but not least, sir, Honorable Kurin Rani always talks about what will government do, etc. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have what they call Fijian chestnuts, EV. We have breadfruit. We have, in Nandronga, you have what we call wichi wichi, what we call Fijian mandarin. Beautiful, very sweet. Honorable Kurin Rani knows about it. Mr. Speaker, sir, mango, jackfruit. Do we ever see? Yes, Honorable Gavoka knows about it too. Mr. Speaker, sir, but we don't have EV orchards. We don't have breadfruit orchards, breadfruit tree orchards. We don't have, wichi wichi orchards. We don't have mango orchards. There is nothing stopping people from developing those orchards. They have in Lenga Lenga
56 varieties of them.
56 varieties of mango. They will give it to you for free. People have the land. You can go and get it from them. There's a lot of opportunities. We need to take a commercial. There's a Mr. Speaker, sir, if we are serious about it, there's no point, Honourable Tuisawao, going on about all these extraneous factors. It is available. The land is there. The opportunity is there. Agriculture will make it available, Mr. Speaker, sir. But we need to be able to think on a commercial basis. Many of the people on the other side of Parliament do not think on a commercial basis. We need the volume. Then you can have factories. We used to have a pineapple factory in the colonial days. I understand where the airport was, they used to grow pineapple. There used to be a pineapple factory in Lotoka somewhere. In Levuka too. Mr. Speaker, sir. Sorry?
The union got rid of it.
The unions got rid of it. Mr. Speaker, sir, my point is that there are opportunities. We need to think on a commercial basis. And people need to be able to take a long-term approach to agriculture. It does not happen overnight. So Honourable Prasad, I mean, frankly, it was one of those occasions where I'm quite surprised that you brought this motion to have an assessment of things like, giving out of seeds. When Honourable Reddy actually has explained, we did this during the COVID period, where a lot of people stayed home, a lot of people did not have jobs, a lot of people wanted to start a small little tete at the back of the yard, which is fine. It suited the particular purpose. But that does not happen now. It's not a continuous basis. But hopefully it actually engenders a culture of growing things at your backyard. But from a commercial perspective, obviously we need to take a long-term view of this. We need to seriously address the issue of land tenure, accessibility or long-term leases for agricultural purposes. Otherwise, we'll be still talking about the same things. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I obviously, one last point I wanted to make is that there are many other fruits that are available. Jackfruit, Utoni India. But it is dawa. All of these things, but nobody, like what do you call moringa? The Americans call moringa. I know that Friends organization does a little bit of it. What do you call sejan? If you went to a farm, cane farm, Mr. Speaker, so most people know, been to cane farms, you always find the house, you'll find a sejan tree, you'll find a tamarind tree, you'll find a lemongrass tree, you'll find a mango tree. These basic trees were all there, Mr. Speaker, sir. But because of the inability for the Agriculture Ministry since the 1970s to look at these crops from a commercial perspective, that's Utoni India, that's sejan, who wants to be interested in that? Suddenly when the Americans have said it's a superfood, everybody wants to get into the act. It grows wildly in Fiji, Mr. Speaker, sir. So we need to change our attitude towards agriculture. Turmeric. We had turmeric in Fiji for ages. We were up in Kayasi a few weeks ago, talking to all the landowners over there. There's wild turmeric growing. They go and actually dig it up. They're selling it at whatever, $20, $30 a kilo. It's been there, but nobody took a commercial approach to it. There was limitation in the way that they thought in the Ministry of Agriculture previously. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, if we are serious about it, we need to expand our horizons. And unfortunately, in the mode of expanding our horizons, this motion is actually a very limited horizon. In fact, it does not even have an horizon. That's why I object to this motion. Thank you, sir.
I thank the Attorney General for his contribution to the debate. I now call on the Honourable Professor Pirmin Prasad to speak in reply. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the members who have spoken on this motion, and especially my opposition colleagues who have supported this motion. But what we've heard, Mr. Speaker, from the government side this afternoon is not surprising, given their complete disrespect for any kind of bipartisanship or any kind of committee work that would look at or analyze or evaluate the government's performance or a particular ministry's performance. And let me just remind the government side, and I've been in Parliament for 7 years, since 2014, not a single motion by the opposition on any investigation or inquiry has been accepted by the Fiji First Party in government. And I know once the former member of Fiji First Party, Dr. Neil Sharma, Mr. Speaker, supported a motion because he understood the motion on health, and obviously we all know what his fate was after that. And I know, Mr. Speaker, and I know that some of the Silent 25, privately, I'm sure, they actually, Mr. Speaker, they actually probably agree in private that this motion is a good motion, but obviously they can't. And if they know, if they vote against the motion, obviously they know their fate. This is very typical of a government, Mr. Speaker, that thinks that it has all the ideas. When the reality of the matter is that this government is actually...
Order.
I'm talking about the motion.
Order.
You strayed long beyond the motion. It's a government which doesn't, as I said before, Mr. Speaker, doesn't believe in bipartisanship. It doesn't believe in working together. It doesn't believe in assessing its own performance. And the so-called initiatives that we've had outlined by the minister again, apart from what he said yesterday, shows that he was actually drowning himself, Mr. Speaker, into the details. And I know, the typical style of Minister Reddy, and I think a lot of that he's probably learned from the Honourable Attorney General, because they are good, Mr. Speaker, in drowning into minor details of what they do, and try and bamboozle the Parliament and hoping that they will be able to convince the members out there about what they're doing is actually correct. Mr. Speaker, we have
Order.
Mr. Speaker, I listened to him very carefully when he was speaking, so he should learn to listen as well. This motion, Mr. Speaker, was very simple. It was about the initiatives and why we need to critically examine the effectiveness. And we've been hearing a lot of these issues out there, as they do as well. But obviously they think that they have their own evaluation system, they have their own mechanics to deal with it. Unfortunately, they don't, Mr. Speaker, because a lot of the initiatives that they have been putting out has not been evaluated. A lot of promises that they've made in the past, and we know, the promises they made after 2014. I know that program where they were supposed to train students at the in agriculture and provide them land and money to go and do business. That's fallen apart. So there are a lot of issues, Mr. Speaker, that I could go on and on with respect to how things have not worked. And that is why it was very important. There are stories about what happened in Nabua, for example. There are people who are complaining about how only certain people in certain localities, known to the minister, known to the agriculture staff, have benefited. So these are all concerns about how these initiatives are being rolled out and whether they are effective or not. So, Mr. Speaker, they seem to be straying away from the real substance of the motion. And it was, Honorable Attorney General says, you can't do it in 4 weeks or whatever. This is a very simple motion. The Parliamentary Standing Committee on Economic Affairs, they go on big motions, big reports. Within a month, if they do their work, they could get a very clear macro picture of what's happening as a result of those initiatives. And that would be helpful. But let me just respond to some specific issues, Mr. Speaker. I think the only sensible contribution that came on the motion was from Honorable Inia Seruratu and from the government side. I think he talked about direct initiatives, and he made this important point. He said, we will have time to assess that. We are saying that that time is right now, because yes, spending is investment. But if you are spending and not evaluating, and that you leave it for the next 4 or 5 years, and then you find, like so many other initiatives, that the initiative has not worked. The spending has been wasted. It has had no effect. So I think, Mr. Speaker, it's very important that policies are evaluated, initiatives are evaluated. You know, they go on and on about what has government done, what have they spent. Yes, spending is fine, you can keep talking about it, but what is the impact of that spending? Then, of course, Mr. Speaker, we had Honorable Praveen Bala, and as usual, I mean, he didn't even understand the motion. He was saying, oh, this motion is about an update. You know, he didn't even understand that, you know, and then, you know, when I said it's not an update, it's an inquiry, then he corrected himself towards the end, and he said, and Mr. Speaker, you know, let me just tell him. I mean, he said, oh, you corrected it towards the end. He said, Mr. Speaker, that I am everywhere, I talk to the farmers. I know he's everywhere. This is what he does. You know, I mean, he's all over the place using government resources, government vehicle, government driver to attend weddings and funerals and, you know, temples. So I know. But he should tell that he does that at the expense of the state. At the expense of the state. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I am told that his driver actually gets more pay than the director of the ministry in which he is in, because there's so much overtime, you know. So that's what they do. That's what they do. And the other thing, Mr. Speaker, he said, oh, Honorable Prasad doesn't understand the idea of leases. I mean, he obviously has no idea about what about leases. And he, Mr. Speaker, is talking about the production of sugarcane. And he keeps talking about production went down because of leases. The leases began expiring from 97, 98, after 2000. But in 2006, Mr. Speaker, we had 3.2 million tons of cane being produced with 18,000 growers. And over the last 15 years, when they have been in charge, the production is now down to 1.4, 1.5 million tons with 12 or 13,000 farmers. What did your government do? If the lease was a problem, if we are producing 3.2 million tons in 2006, and this government came into power in 2006, you can't keep talking about leases for the last 15 years. You got to look at, because in 2006, it's a simple fact. It's a simple fact. I mean, under this government, the leases were renewed. I mean, I raised this in Parliament, and the Honourable Prime Minister did answer that, and he said he was going to look into it. Senganga farmers were paying 30 to 40,000 in lease premiums. You know, so he. No, I'm just responding to him. I'm responding to him. I've talked about the motion already. This is my right of reply. This is my right of reply. This is my right of reply to what has come out from the government side, Mr. Speaker. I have talked about the motion already. So this lie that Honorable Bala keeps telling, and this is what he tells. This is what he goes in little pocket meetings, in funerals, in weddings, and says, hey, you know, You know, this is what is happening. This is what is happening. So, you know, he keeps, lying about what has happened in the past, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Reddy, as I said, Mr. Speaker, drowned himself into details. You know, he was throwing statistics here, throwing statistics there, but he ignored. And Honorable Attorney General said I didn't raise the positive. I was actually talking about the agri-business sector. That's the report that I was quoting. When I talk about the other sectors, I will say what this report says about the government. But this report, Honorable Attorney General, I was responding to the agriculture sector and all the constraints that are there, the binding constraints. So, you know, basically the Honorable Attorney General was sidetracking and not admitting that this report actually says very, very clearly what are the binding constraints in the agriculture sector. And they talk about a number of things which I highlighted yesterday, Mr. Speaker. And he talked about, he talked about what he did when he was in Commerce Commission. I remember when he was the chairman of the Commerce Commission, he recommended $75 a bag for a fertilizer. That's what he was, because he just had no idea, no understanding of what was going on. I mean, he was basically parroting. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said before, I listened to him very carefully when he was speaking. So he should listen to me. And our friend.
Point of order, Babu, Baito. Mr. Speaker said, Honorable Prasad just mentioned that Commerce Commission set fertilizer prices at $75. Commerce Commission doesn't set fertilizer prices. Thank you.
Well, I said he recommended as chairman.
Oh, come on. Hey.
Honorable.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, as I want to implore on them again, that they should let me talk, because when they were all talking, I sat down and listened to them carefully. Honorable Koya, in his drive to, in his zeal to, go personal, I'm not going to go there, Mr. Speaker, but all I want to say to him, from his own experience, before the 2018 election, Mr. Speaker, I know Honorable Koya was throughout the country. Even 2 weeks before the election, I had a meeting in Raketi, and 2 weeks later, he ends up there. He probably would have shaken, thousands of hands delivering $1,000 cash grant. And at that time, some of us were saying, we need an evaluation. I don't think we still have an evaluation of all the millions of dollars that were distributed for small, medium, or micro enterprises. And Mr. Speaker, I don't want to hit him below the belt, but after distributing all that and shaking hands, he still could not make it to Parliament. He had to wait until one of his colleagues got sacked, then he came here. So that is the logic. That is the logic of this motion, that when you are putting out initiatives, if you have an opportunity, if you have time, you must look at the effectiveness of those. And this was a very, very simple motion. In fact, it would have helped them, Mr. Speaker. But all they did here, all they came here was to play politics, play to the gallery. They always claim we are playing politics, but they are all politicians. And I know you're making a lot of noise because you are caught out now, That's what you do. That's what you do.
Order.
So, Mr. Speaker, let me also respond to the Honorable Attorney General, where he talked about research. I know I've talked about this before in Parliament. In fact, in the 70s and 80s, we had one of the best research, training and extension within the agriculture sector. And Mr. Speaker, I remember, we passed a bill for a National Research Council, and we talked about how that National Research Council was going to be linked to different sectors, different ministries, different sectors of the economy, conducting research, looking at, evaluating policies and understanding where we're going right, where we're going wrong. Now, that has not seen the light of the day. And again, Mr. Speaker, they keep talking about leases. I mean, if I heard the Honorable Attorney General correctly, he said, oh, all those leases under ALTA, farmers never got loan. That's a complete, falsehood. In fact...
Speaker, sir, point of order. I did not say what you said I said.
You said that?
No, you said all farmers under ALTA. I said that when you have short-term leases, sir, nobody lends you money. I said there used to be crop lease, and used to be given by NBF, then Colonial, and now FDB lends to farmers at subsidized rates. But nobody gives long-term and large loans on short-term leases. It's a fact. I never said ALTA.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, all farmers, who had 30 years leases under ALTA, and I know this because I've studied those farmers. Apart from FDB, many of them also, Bank of Baroda, Mr. Speaker, has been lending to farmers for a very, very long time in this country. Yes, I mean, security of tenure is very important. The other point that Honorable Attorney General talked about. No, I didn't say that. I just said that Mr. Speaker, I was just correcting him that farmers did get loan. Ideally, everybody would like to have long-term leases, and we've talked about it, we've understood that, and some of us have advocated that for years, that long-term security of tenure is very, very important for productivity. So that's what I want to correct you, that they did get loan, even with short-term leases. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, I mean, they quite shamelessly, use the word papi, which means, sinner. And they keep talking about 87, they keep talking about NBF. I mean, they talk about the collapse of the NBF, but the guy who actually presided over the collapse of the NBF is a good friend of them. They know that. They send him as ambassador. They now recently appointed him as the chair of the Fiji Higher Education Commission. I mean, so, let's be honest, Mr. Speaker. They are playing politics. They're thinking that, if we keep talking about NBF, if we keep talking about 87, if we keep talking about Rambuka, then and they forget, Mr. Speaker. They forget that, yes, 1987 happened. Nobody forgets the atrocity. Nobody forgets what happened. But Mr. Speaker, what happened after 87? What happened after 92? What happened after 94 election? What happened when we had the 97 constitution? We also need to talk about what happened in 2000. We also need to talk about what happened in 2006 and the impact. Well, in that constitution, Honorable Prime Minister, you also have the immunity provision for Mr. Rambuka. If you have so much hate for the guy, why did you give him the immunity? So, Mr. Speaker, we are looking forward. We are putting ideas. We are thinking for the future. We are not going back 35 years. We are not forgetting what happened 35 years ago. We're not forgetting what happened 22 years ago in 2000. We haven't forgotten what happened in 2006. But Mr. Speaker, we have to look forward. We have to look to the future. And when we bring a motion like this to Parliament, we are looking at the future. We are looking at creating a system, an environment in Parliament where government, opposition can work together, can agree on certain aspects of an inquiry or investigation. And when they sit in the opposition, Mr. Speaker, and when we are in government, we will treat them well. We will treat them very well. We will respect them. We will work together. And if they bring a motion, Mr. Speaker, which we feel is important, that needs our support, that we need to evaluate our policies, we will support that. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, they are not in that mode. And I still urge them to think about this motion, support this. Let the standing committee
Order.
on which they have the majority of the members, to do that, so that we create a better environment, a better understanding of how we can assist the farmers and how we can make agriculture more sustainable in this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Member for his reply. Honourable Members, the Parliament will now vote. The question is that Parliament authorises the Standing Committee on Economic Affairs to assess the impact of direct initiatives to farmers in the agricultural sector, in particular, the distribution of seeds and seedling for cash crop, help in the form of materials provided to dairy farmers, provision of irrigation pumps, piping, rice planting, ploughing, and harrowing of land by the Ministry of Agriculture, handling of breeder goats, sheep, and report back at the next sitting of Parliament. Does any member oppose the motion? There being opposition, the Parliament will now vote. Open the vote. The Honourable Rosie Agba will be voting virtually. Close the vote.
The results of the vote are as follows. 18 ayes, 27 noes, and 6 have not voted.
Honourable members, the result of the vote being 18 ayes, 27 nays, 6 not voted, the motion is therefore defeated. Honourable members, time moves on, but we'll move on as well. Secretary General.
Questions?
Honourable members, the first oral question for today, I call on the Honourable Pio Tikandurandua to ask question 121. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, I rise to ask question 121 of 2022, and the question is directed to the Minister for Education, Heritage, Arts and Local Government. Can the Minister inform Parliament who is paying the Suva City Council for its garbage collection services within the Nasinu municipal boundary? Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you. I now call on the Minister for Education, Heritage and Arts and Local Government, the Honourable Premila Kumar. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. The short answer is Nasinu Town Council.
Thank you. We'll move on. Honourable members, as to the second oral question for today, I am allowing the question to be asked tomorrow, in addition to the questions listed in tomorrow's order paper. The Honourable Minister is indisposed at the moment. So we move on to the third oral question, and I call on the Honourable Simeon Erasova to ask questions 1, 2, 3. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to ask question 123/2022 under my name to ask the Minister for Agriculture, Waterways and Environment. Can the Minister update Parliament on the construction of seawalls in coastal villages in Kandavu, Naka?
I now call on the Minister for Agriculture, Waterways and Environment, the Honourable Dr. Mahendra Reddy. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honourable Member for asking this question. I don't know why he has only asked for Kandavu when they should be talking about the entire country. I think they still can't come out of that initial notion of this is my area, so only I'll talk about my area, only they are important. Mr. Speaker, on Kandavu Island, the Ministry of Waterways have completed coastal protection works for Namuana village, 250 meters of seawall, and Tabuki District School, 300 meters of seawall worth $1.2 million. For the next financial year, we have earmarked nature-based seawall coastal protection works for Wailevu village, 300 meters, with approximate cost of Fiji and $45,000, and Namuana village rock boulders extension of 150 meters, with an approximate cost of $30,000. So next financial year, these two areas, Wailevu village and Namuana village, are on our list. Of course, subject to funding. We'll look at the next budget. But in addition to these two, we also have requests for Nassau village, 300 meters, Richmond High School, 410 meter, Namukelewu Primary School, 360 meter, Nasengai village, 400 meter, Labuka village, 600 meter, Labuka Yala village, 280 meter, Drabuwalu village, 160 meter, Muani village, 300 meter, Rakiraki village, 300 meter, and Vambea village, 300 meters. So this accumulates to a total length of 3.4 kilometers of coastal protection works that needs to be done in Kandavu Island. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Minister.
Supplementary question. Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I just like to thank the Minister because on the November 2020, when you did the Namona, you promised Wailewu and the Fugu and everything on the 21st, on the January 2021 that you were going to complete all this. But thank you for publicly saying in Parliament that you will do everything, and especially Nassau. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member, that's not a supplementary question.
I supplementary thank him, Mr. Speaker, for this.
Honourable, thank you. We will move on to the fourth oral question for today, and I call on the Honourable Veena Bhatnagar to ask question 124. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Question number 124/2022 is directed to the Minister for Commerce, Trade, Tourism and Transport. Can the Minister tell us the following: the enactment of Investment Act 2021 and the Investment Fiji Act 2022, can the Minister inform Parliament on the actions taken by the Ministry to create awareness on the new processes? Thank you.
I now call on the Minister for Commerce, Trade, Tourism and Transport, the Honourable Fayez Kaur. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, sir. I thank the Honourable Member for the question. Mr. Speaker, sir, with both the Investment Act 2021 and the Investment Fiji Act 2022 being passed in Parliament and commencing on the 1st of August, there's actually some renewed enthusiasm with regards to investments and support for both domestic and foreign investors. These two legislations, Honourable Speaker, set the foundation for Fiji in terms of attracting new investments for both domestic and also for foreign investors. The reforms are actually engineered towards creation of a conducive business environment and includes providing accelerated response, etc., to investors applying for these permits. These investments related to legislative reforms have been an open government strategy and they're tailored towards inclusive growth. So the key components, Honourable Speaker, whilst developing these legislations and accompanying regulations was actually transparency, accountability and integrity, sir. So the technical committee responsible was inclusive of respective governmental, statutory organizations as well as our development partners, the World Bank and the IFC. Our awareness mechanism, Honourable Speaker, has remained consistent. It's actually targeted and tailor-made to maximize outreach to relevant agencies, relevant audiences in the best possible way. Prominence is given to digital platforms and social media channels to put up significant awareness events. And in other words, the aim of awareness raising is to provide adequate information on the new systems and processes. Mr. Speaker, so with the time available, 3-month preparation time frame from now until the 1st of August 2022, the Ministry is actually engaging with the Registrar of Companies, Digital Fiji, all investment approval agencies, Fiji Immigration Department, Investment Fiji, all the investment agents and private sector representatives. We're actually taking the change to the agencies and making them understand. And firstly, it's about the authentication of investors through the investment registration process, which will be through the Registrar of Companies and Fiji Revenue and Customs. The minimum investment threshold, which is across all sectors, a minimum of $300,000, whilst some specific sectors have $500,000 or $1.5 or $2 million. The reserved and restricted list also of activities, and the purposes of the minimum investment threshold and the list of activities that are restricted is to provide adequate protection to our MSMEs. Purpose of national interest also in the test criteria to protect certain key sectors that they can have a significant impact on the people of Fiji, and the national interest foreign investor report requirement is there to maintain data and also to assess implementation. Investor permit procedures also. Mr. Speaker, sir, in terms of the Investment Fiji Act 2022, as we all know, Investment Fiji is a key agency at the helm of this particular transformation as they transit from regulatory role to a investment promotion agency. They finalized its marketing and promotion strategy to do targeted campaigns in key markets. They're also devising strategies for balancing of the resources and development of an action plan to support their path. Moreover, Honourable Speaker, sir, Investment Fiji continues to participate in webinars and seminars executed at both national and international level, seizing the opportunity to create awareness and share information on the new regime. In conclusion, sir, throughout the tenure of this review, we've actually received enormous support and contributions from both in-house and our development partners, and this has led to development of streamlined, coherent, digitally executable legislations attuned to international best practices. Therefore, in the coming months, Honourable Speaker, we will definitely be seeing some positive changes in the investment landscape, which will result in better investment opportunities in Fiji. It's all about capitalizing on the strategies for recovery of our Fijian economy, sir, and the commencement of the two acts will raise investor confidence and signal to the world that Fiji is actually open for business. I thank you for allowing me to answer the questions.
I thank the Honourable Minister.
Sorry,
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary question to the Minister. Can the Minister inform the House on how the new legal framework will ensure protection of the micro, small and medium enterprises? Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Honourable Member for the question. As mentioned earlier, a lot of work has been done in Fiji's investment space. And one of the key visions behind the review of the particular act was to ensure protection of our MSMEs. And we assessed the current framework, which was in place since 1999, and we saw the much needed amendments that were brought in place by the Bainimarama government and then the Fiji First government to protect our MSMEs. We've evaluated the modern market, Honourable Speaker said, and determined that MSMEs cannot be protected by simply carving out sectors. It was important that foreign direct investment were allowed in certain sectors as it will allow for the development of the MSMEs around it. I wish to highlight, sir, that this new investment framework is aligned to international best practices, but has been contextualized to meet the needs of Fijian investment climate. Whilst it can be argued that we've opened a widened door to foreign investors, we have ensured there still remains enough protection for our local entrepreneurs. New framework is also protecting our local business at the same time. We are encouraging foreign investments. We actually need and want high-end foreign investments in Fiji in sectors which are already growing, but we need further enhancement. We're also encouraging healthy competition for local businesses, enabling them to get out of their comfort zones and explore the untapped opportunities that are available. The new regulations on reserved and restricted activities list provides a minimum threshold of $300,000 for foreign investments in Fiji. And in addition, sir, for activities such as fishing, the minimum threshold now features a minimum investment of $1.5 million, and for tobacco manufacturers, $1 million with 75% of locally grown raw material. So more importantly, investment areas such as homestay and backpackers and motels and guest houses, Airbnb, etc., now feature a minimum investment of $1 million. These requirements are there, almost speakers, to protect our locals, but do not limit foreign investments. This will allow our local entrepreneurs to continue undertaking such investments as per their resources and skills. One other strategy, sir, for the benefit of our domestic investors is the changing dynamics of Investment Fiji. The role of Investment Fiji allows it to be a focused and fully fledged investment promotion agency, providing facilitation, aftercare and support to all investors, whether domestic or foreign. So I'm confident, sir, that this new framework will make an enormous impact in Fiji's investment climate and in our economy overall. I thank you for the question, sir.
I thank the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his response to the questions. My supplementary question is this, can the Minister confirm whether there are certain businesses that still reserved for locals, or have we opened up the market for competition? Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Honourable Member for the question. I think I just answered that. The reserved and restricted list is different now. There are certain activities that have been slightly opened up, but there are restrictions on it in terms of how much is being invested. I suggest you actually read the act. It's simpler in its form now.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next oral question for today, the fifth oral question. And I call on the Honourable Pedeli, Posanimbola, to ask question 125. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to ask question 125 of 2022 to the Minister for Fisheries. Can the Minister update Parliament on the initiatives in place to ensure the supply of fish to the Pacific Fishing Company?
Thank you. I now call on the Minister for Fisheries, the Honourable Cervical. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, sir, and I thank the Honourable Wasanimbola for the question. Honourable Speaker, I wish to, from the outset, state that the Fiji First Government have always supported the operations at PEFCO and will continue to do so. We support this government commercial company as it provides employment to the people on the island of Ovalau and Lomaiviti province as a whole. Majority of the 1,000 workers that are employed at PEFCO are women who work the lines to prepare cooked fish to be vacuum packed and sent to Bubble Bee in the US for canning. It is also important to understand the elements that needs to be considered when trying to secure tuna being the raw material for PEFCO. Mr. Speaker, sir, to put things into context, PEFCO has a capacity to process 30,000 metric tons of albacore annually. In 2018, PEFCO was able to process 19,000 metric tons. This production figure is around 63% of PEFCO's capacity, and there's a need to secure around 11,000 metric tons of albacore for PEFCO to reach its full capacity. It is very important to understand that Fiji's current fleet cannot sustain PEFCO's albacore demand. Mr. Speaker, sir, to address this, the Ministry of Fisheries has put out plans to help secure raw materials for PEFCO with the support of line agencies and partners. Mr. Speaker, sir, Chang Formosa, or FCF's acquisition of Bumblebee in January 2020 strengthened the best-in-class sustainability and social responsibility efforts and puts FCF in an advantageous position for sustained growth and leadership throughout the tuna and seafood industry. FCF being one of the three major players in tuna has integrated into the sector, even more so now, with the acquisition which ensured continuity in terms of supply of tuna to PEFCO for processing, and it is in all players' best interest to ensure ample and consistent supply. The Ministry will soon be finalizing the formalization of our partnership with FCF. This is currently being vetted to better understand the legal implications. Honourable Speaker, sir, the bottom line is we need to attract more fishing vessels to come to Fiji and unload more tuna for PEFCO and other value-adding companies. Mr. Speaker, sir, these plans include holding discussions with Pacific Island states that are parties to the Nauru Agreement, in particular with countries that have vast EEZ and have abundant supply of tuna. The Ministry is working closely with these countries to work out some arrangements, and we are also working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in these negotiations. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, sir, there's an ongoing work being carried out with our bilateral partners who are more advanced and developed when it comes to fishing fleet. Once Fiji gains access to PNA waters, we will need to have a fleet that has capacity to secure raw materials. With ongoing discussions, Honourable Speaker, sir, we are looking to secure per-cent vessels and motherships at the joint venture arrangement with our bilateral partners. This will help us secure tuna from outside Fiji. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, sir, one of the best options the Ministry of Fisheries is working on is the development of multi-purpose fishing port. After clearly assessing the current annual stock and the number of fishing vessels needed to supply raw material, not just to PEFCO but other processing facilities, it has been identified that Fiji needs to attract at least 250 vessels to Fiji to meet the current demand. These vessels do not need to fish in our EZ, but we are trying to attract them to unload their catch in Fiji. Honourable Speaker, sir, the Ministry is currently conducting ongoing discussions with the private sector and the investors to help realize this important initiative. In a nutshell, Honourable Speaker, sir, it is important to understand that the process of securing raw materials for PEFCO is a tough one. For one, the fish that we are looking for to secure is not ours. Through our fishing brokers, FCF, we have been able to secure 19,000 metric tons for our production lines. What we are trying to do now is provide a market and a fleet-friendly environment to help meet the current shortfall in raw materials. Honourable Speaker, sir, the Ministry of Fisheries will continue to work closely with line ministries on this, and we hope to progress this work effectively.
Thank you. Honourable Minister. We will move on to the sixth oral question for today, and I now call on the Honourable George Veganathan to ask question 126. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, sir, for allowing me to ask question 126 of 2022 to the Minister for Agriculture, Waterways and Environment. Can the Minister inform Parliament on the impact of commercial kava export to Australia, which was approved by the Australian Government in December 2021? Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on the Minister for Agriculture, Waterways and Environment, the Honourable Dr. Mahendra Reddy. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honourable Member for asking the question. Yes, in December 2021, the Australian Government, through DFET, launched a kava pilot program. Prior to that, kava was not allowed to be exported to Australia. So they allowed a pilot program for export of commercial kava consignments into Australia, and several of our local exporters took advantage of the opportunity. It has been 5 months now since the opening of this pathway. Earlier in May this year, Fiji has already exported around a total of 30.4 metric tons of kava to Australia, earning around $3.4 million. So considering the short duration, we note that this is a substantial gain that we have made. There are a total of 146 exporters. Fiji is not the only country. There are other countries who are exporting kava. A total of 146 exporters. Out of these 146, 94 exporters are from Fiji. So we are basically exporting most of the requirement of the market. And there are pretty stringent requirements in terms of label, what needs to go into the label, the importer details, the lot codes, the country of origin statements, and required warning statements. And so these are the stringent requirements that kind of hampered uplift of or entry of exporters to export to Australia. They have this year they've also allowed other variant of kava, let's say kava root chips, kava root powder, whole kava root as well to be exported to Australia. So despite the challenges of labeling, we have got good uptake that we have made in the first 5 months. Our exporters have been learning along the way and making sure that all requirements are met, and there's very limited obstacles to exploring this new kava market, and a massive market. There's a large population in Australia who are from the Pacific, particularly from Fiji, who are consuming kava, the kava lovers, and we want to ensure that we take, if not all, a chunk of that market, and for that, we need to get ready on the ground level. It's not that we can do this in a month or 3 months or a year. Kava is a long-term crop. So unfortunately, members from the other side don't understand this. They want to do an impact analysis for fencing material in 2 weeks' time. Are we giving the fencing material now? These are capital investment. Their impact will in the livestock sector will come 15 years later, 20 years later. Irrigation, you can't have an impact analysis on the irrigation material they're giving now. So Mr. Speaker said, we are quite impressed with the uptake, and the compliance level is about 81%. And we had so far no biosecurity issue, so we want to thank our exporters for showing interest. We want to capture this market. If not, if we don't do that, Vanuatu will come in. So I think we're doing extremely well on this. And I want to thank the Honourable Prime Minister for establishing this Wawale partnership, which is this opening of the kava market is a response of this partnership, the Wawale partnership that was established between the two Prime Ministers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
I thank the Honourable Minister. We will move on to the seventh oral question for today, and I call on the Honourable Tanya Wanganika to ask question 127. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the Minister of Health question number 127 under my name, and my question is, can the Minister update Parliament on the facilities available to women for pap smear screening?
Thank you. I now call on the Minister for Health and Medical Services, the Honourable Dr. Ephraim Wangarimet. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for the question. Honourable Speaker, cervical cancer screening, which the pap smear is commonly known as an essential part, is an important part of health screening component. And with cancer screening, whilst you might be able to pick up those who have cancer, the most important thing is to be able to pick up disease before they have cancer, or the pre-cancerous conditions. Because if that is treated early, then that person will not have cancer. And through awareness and health promotion activities, which targeting risk factors of cervical cancer, the Ministry has led for many years, and with the support of health partners, the primary care programs and activities that address the load of cervical cancer in women and girls. And there have been a number of significant actions and achievements against this deadly disease in the last decade. First, Honourable Speaker, we are all aware that young adolescent daughters have the ability to have the HPV, or human papillomavirus vaccine, which was safely introduced and now routinely given to all Year 8 female students in Fiji since 2013. This vaccine is known to be able to prevent or reduce the likelihood of cancer, because the virus is able to change the cells as the lady keeps on growing, change the cells and make it cancerous if it continues on within the woman. Number two, the establishment of Fiji's first cervical cancer screening policy in 2015, which has guided our actions so far, which we continue to review and update. Number three, the procurement of the automated liquid-based thin prep cytology screener machine, Hologic, to assist the centralized pathological diagnosis at CWM. Fourth, strengthening of the Ministry's collaboration with other stakeholders, such as the Fiji Cancer Society, Medical Services Pacific, Reproductive and Family Health Association in Fiji, to better coordinate the services provided to women and girls, and also the work with multilateral partners such as WHO, UNFPA, to name a few. Endorsing a cost-benefit analysis by WHO in 2021-2022 on the introduction of HPV testing, which tests for the HPV virus that causes cervical cancer, thin prep pap smear technique, which uses the machine at CWM, and the visual inspection with acetic acid testing in Fiji. The outcome of this analysis will inform the upcoming cervical cancer policy review. With the aim of accelerating an elimination of cervical cancer, the Ministry supports WHO recommended 3 key steps of vaccination, with HPV vaccination for adolescent daughters, screening, which is either pap smear or the thin prep, and treatment to reduce by more than 40% the number of new cervical cancer cases and deaths by the year 2050. With vaccination, the National HPV Vaccination Campaign targeting young women or young ladies between 9 and 12 in schools was introduced in 2008 as a pilot, later introduced as a routine vaccine in 2013 through the bilateral support of DFAT and now fully funded by government. The reintroduction of HPV vaccination program as a primary prevention mechanism for cervical cancer caused by human papillomavirus infection was a significant development against this disease. The vaccination is available across all health facilities in all health divisions in Fiji throughout our school health vaccination program. For screening, the campaign target for 2030 is to achieve 70% of the women screened using a high-performance test by age 35 and again by 45. Screening has been further strengthened, as I've alluded to earlier, with the procurement of the thin prep liquid-based cytology screening machine at the CWM hospital, and the machine can potentially screen more than 40,000 tests per year, picking out the abnormal results for further assessment. The introduction of the thin prep machine has greatly improved the efficacy in screening processes and accuracy in diagnosis. It's been estimated that the accuracy for thin prep versus pap smear can be even up to more than 50% more efficient. The strengthening of the cervical cancer screening has also created an opportunity to screen for breast cancer. The screening process for both cervical and breast cancer is done by the Ministry in partnership with the Fiji Cancer Society, MSP, and Reproductive Health of Fiji. While the screening was affected during the COVID-19 outbreak in Fiji, we have started strengthening the procurement process of necessary commodities. We've started to scale up again the screening for all eligible women with the support of our partners. Lastly, with the treatment, the Ministry has continued to strengthen treatment throughout the purchase and upgrading of medical equipment. There's ongoing training for doctors and nurses who provide specialist gynecological care for women and girls. Cervical cancer screening is available in all health centers, subdivisional and divisional hospitals, and at selected nursing stations where nurses have been trained to undergo the to be able to do the pap smear of the thin prep. Honourable Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for that question, and those are the answers that I've provided for.
I thank the Honourable Minister.
Can I just ask a supplementary question? Thank you, Honourable Minister. Thank you for that, because screening for pap and breast is very important to the women. Honourable Minister, I understand that the free pap smear testing that's normally done at the Iowa Women's Wellness Centre is no longer in place. When can we women expect this service to be up and running? I know you've mentioned that they can go to the other facilities, but in particular the Iowa Wellness Centre. Thank you. The one at Brown Street, Honourable Minister.
Thank you. Honourable Minister, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Speaker. That centre was, throughout COVID, it was closed because we were using it as part of the hospital isolation and also part of the COVID process. Yeah? Honourable Speaker, as we speak, screening is available in other areas, but I've been told by my team that they're moving towards moving the team back into that centre. It will happen in the next few weeks or so. As I've alluded to earlier, it was closed throughout the COVID. As with all the spaces in the hospital had to be allocated into COVID spaces and non-COVID spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to the 8th oral question for today. And I call on the Honourable Selai and Maitonga to ask question 128. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, sir. I rise to ask question number 128/2022 under my name to ask the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service, Communications, Housing and Community Development. Can the Minister inform Parliament on why Fiji's debt remains sustainable and cannot be compared to the Sri Lankan crisis? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I now call on the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service, Communications, Housing and Community Development, the Honourable Ayaz Syed Kayu. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, see, I see the three stooges now have actually disappeared again. Sir, and in fact it is at the behest of Honourable Prasad and his colleagues or lackeys or whatever you want to call them. They are the ones who raised this spectre and actually compared Fiji to Sri Lanka and said that we are in the same boat as Sri Lanka. Mr. Speaker, so in the interest of time, I'll be very brief, but essentially to highlight, and people can ask supplementary questions if they do want to. So the difference between Fiji and Sri Lanka is a world of difference. Mr. Speaker, sir, firstly, Sri Lanka didn't have or doesn't have adequate foreign reserves available in the country. It had $7 billion due in external debt repayments alone, but only had $2 billion in foreign exchange. $7 billion to pay offshore, but only $2 billion. Fiji's external debt repayments on average is just around $100 million annually, and we have $3 billion available in foreign reserves. This is 30 times more than what's needed for external debt repayments, number one. Number two, Mr. Speaker, sir, Fiji has over 10 times more revenue available to service its debt. Our current revenues are over $3 billion, and debt servicing is just over $350 million. For Fiji to be able to not service our debt, our revenue will have to fall to below $300 million. Even during COVID, Mr. Speaker, sir, the one in a 100-year event, we managed to maintain revenues at around $2 billion. Yeah. This is basically shows, Mr. Speaker, sir, why Fiji has never defaulted on debt and why we will never default on debt. Sri Lanka's revenue situation is completely different. Simply too low and cannot be compared to Fiji. Thirdly, Sri Lanka's lenders stopped lending to them. Our lenders have recently been lending us 5 times more than what they were lending before and continue and want to lend. These are credible lenders. They're not some fly-by-night lenders. It's the World Bank, ADB, JICA, AIIB. and other domestic institutional investors. For them to want to lend more to Fiji, even during COVID, means they fully know and understand and appreciate the economic and financial management capacity of government. Mr. Speaker, sir, thirdly, we have accessed, as we mentioned in Parliament previously, $900 million in the past 2 years in highly concessional debt from JICA and IDA. IDA is the World Bank, with long-term maturity of 40 years, 10-year grace period, net zero interest rate, and other JICA loans, Mr. Speaker, sir, a 15-year terms with 4-year grace period and near zero interest rate. Our debt repayment is spread over many years, while Sri Lanka's debt repayments of bonds had to be paid in lump sum immediately. Like the Garase government had the 5-year bond in 2006, it was due 5 years later in a lump sum. That puts immediate pressure on that 5th year. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have essentially, Mr. Speaker, sir, the reason why they have a lot of confidence, we have been borrowing for capital expenditure. In fact, as highlighted in Parliament previously, we had an operating surplus. In other words, we had that much revenue that when we paid for all our everyday operational expenditure, we still had a surplus, which we then directed towards capital expenditure and then borrowed more for capital expenditure, Mr. Speaker, sir. And obviously these expenditures in capital investment will give us a debt return, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, we've obviously cannot be compared to Sri Lanka, and I was quite flabbergasted that you have organizations like Fiji Times and CFL, given this person has lost absolute credibility, Nilesh Gaundar and Wadan Narsi, writing up all these articles, and this is what we continuously say. For their own political purposes, they're quite happy. They're quite happy to undermine our country, publicly, internationally, not just domestically, but internationally, sir. And like I said, Mr. Speaker, sir, I can go on about a lot more in details. Now, for example, if you look at the interest rates that we pay, what we call the yields, cost of debt, weighted average interest rate, in 2020, January is 6.2, January 2021 is 5.2, January 2022 is 4.6, Mr. Speaker, sir. Refinancing risk from 8.1 to 10.8, Mr. Speaker, sir. And that was lower risk. Interest rate risk, Mr. Speaker, sir. Again, improving. Mr. Speaker, sir, our foreign risk in terms of foreign debts, Mr. Speaker, sir, is about 31.2% in respect of our total exposure. So we're in a very good space in that respect, Mr. Speaker, sir. And we continuously say, please, and Honorable Biman Prasad is notorious for this. Notorious for this. For short-term political gain, he gets all his mates lined up, gets all these media organizations to just berate, to make government look bad. But it's not about government. It's about the country. It's about our people. It's about undermining confidence. Mr. Speaker, sir, as we've said continuously, that, they want to change government. If they do come on this side, God forbid, but if they do theoretically, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, what will happen, they'll have to deal with the lack of confidence that they've created in the market. And they'll very quickly realize they have to deal with the market. And the market, Mr. Speaker, sir, has a very long-term memory. It does not believe just because the government changed, therefore it's all hunky-dory. Banks have a long-term memory. Institutional investors have a long-term memory. So to continuously assault the Fijian economy just for short-term political gain. Honourable member has been sworn in. She knows exactly what I'm talking about. She's in the private sector. She knows exactly what I'm talking about. There needs to be an appreciation of that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
I thank the Honourable Attorney General. Honourable members, that brings an end to question time, and we move on to the next agenda item. Honourable members, we will now adjourn, and Parliament will be adjourned until tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m.